Rain scoured the plain in silver sheets, hissing as it struck scorched metal and alien armor. The battlefield had gone quiet after the slaughter, not peaceful but watchful, as if the ground itself waited to see what would happen next. In the center of that silence knelt a single human woman, her hands bound behind her back, her breath coming in sharp, painful pulls. Mara Vale tasted blood and copper. One eye was swollen shut, and every muscle screamed when she shifted her weight, yet she forced herself upright. She refused to slump. Around her stood 7 figures, towering and broad, their armor crafted from bone and black alloy. Trophies etched into every plate. These were the apex predators of the Carval Dominion, hunters whose names were spoken only in fear by the worlds they erased. Their leader stepped closer, talons sinking into the mud. His mandibles clicked with something that might have been amusement. He looked at Mara the way one examined a broken tool, curious but unconcerned. "You fought well," he said in rough galactic common. "For prey." The words scraped against her nerves. An hour earlier, her unit had been 30 strong. Veterans. Friends. Now their bodies lay scattered across the plain, cooling beneath alien boots and indifferent rain. Mara's jaw tightened as images of their last stand burned behind her eyes. She felt grief rising, hot and suffocating, but she crushed it down. Grief could wait. Survival could not. The hunters circled her slowly, discussing her fate as if she were already dead. Some wanted to end it quickly. Others argued for sport. The leader listened, then raised one clawed hand. Silence fell immediately. He reached his belt and drew a human sidearm. Its surface scraped and dented, and tossed at Mara's knees. It splashed into the mud inches from her fingers. 10 rounds, he said. Another hunter dropped a combat knife beside it. The blade nicked and dull from prior use. Laughter rippled through the group, low and confident. "Run into the ruins. If you live until dawn, you may leave. If not, you'll entertain us." Mara stared at the weapon, then up at the leader. She expected fear to grip her, to hollow her out the way it had on her first battlefield years ago. Instead, she felt a strange clarity settle over her mind. They thought her finished. They thought pain and loss had reduced her to something small. They were wrong. She rose slowly, every movement deliberate, and unbound hands clenched around the knife. "You should have killed me," she said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. The leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Run," he repeated. Mara turned away from them and limped toward the distant ruins of a shattered city, its broken towers jagged against the storm-lit sky. Each step sent pain lancing through her legs, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was alive. Behind her, she heard the hunters follow, unhurried, savoring the chase they believed inevitable. As she crossed into the shadow of the ruins, Mara let her breathing slow. She counted steps, noted cover, marked narrow passages and unstable structures with quick, practiced glances. Training overrode exhaustion. Memories surfaced unbidden. Her instructor's voice, calm and relentless, telling her that humans survived not because they were strongest, but because they adapted. She reached the first collapsed building and paused just long enough to slide the magazine into the pistol. 10 rounds. No margin for error. The knife felt light in her other hand, familiar despite the damage. She did not pray. She did not curse. She simply planned. The apex predators entered the ruins moments later, spreading out, confident in their numbers and their reputation. They did not see the shift in her posture or the way her gaze sharpened. To them, this was still a game. Mara vanished into the wreckage, leaving only rain, mud, and the quiet promise of resistance behind her. The hunt had begun, but not in the way they expected. She moved deeper, letting darkness swallow her silhouette, listening to the cadence of alien steps echoing off broken stone. Fear brushed her thoughts, but it did not rule them. Fear was a signal, not a command. She used it to sharpen her focus, to remind herself what was at stake beyond her own survival. Somewhere, far from this ruined world, people trusted that the line would hold. She intended to be that line. As the first roar of pursuit rolled to the ruins, Mara set her jaw and disappeared between the fractured walls, carrying grief, resolve, and the quiet certainty that the predators behind her had already made a fatal miscalculation. The night closed in, and with it came the reckoning none of them yet understood at all fully. Mara moved through the ruins like a ghost, keeping close to shattered walls and collapsed transit lines where the apex predator's bulk worked against them. Every step was measured, every breath controlled, because panic wasted energy she could not spare. The city smelled of wet ash and old fire, a graveyard that remembered violence well. She ducked into a partially flooded service tunnel and dragged loose debris behind her, not to block pursuit but to shape it. The hunters thundered closer, their voices echoing through broken corridors, confident and loud. Mara listened, mapping their movement in her mind, identifying impatience in the rhythm of their steps. They believed overwhelming force would solve everything. Humans learned long ago that force without thought was brittle. The first predator dropped through a fractured ceiling, armor scraping stone as it landed. Mara fired once. The shot cracked through exposed flesh beneath its jaw, and the massive body collapsed into the water with a hiss of steam and blood. She did not linger. One round spent, one enemy down, and no room for hesitation. She moved again, climbing through a maintenance shaft that forced her to crawl. Pain flared in her ribs, but she welcomed the confinement. Above her, frustrated roars shook dust from the ceiling. She emerged into a narrow transit platform and overturned a rusted rail car, bracing it against a support column. When another predator charged, the unstable floor gave way, dropping it into darkness below. Its scream ended abruptly. 2 down. The laughter behind her faded, replaced by clipped signals and deliberate silence. They were adapting. Mara felt a flicker of grim satisfaction, mixed with concern. She had forced them to take her seriously, and that meant the hunt would become more dangerous. Her boot slipped on wet stone as a blade grazed her shoulder, hot pain streaking down her arm. She spun, parrying with her knife, steel shrieking against alien alloy. The predator was faster than the others, its movements disciplined rather than reckless. Mara fired twice at close range. One round shattered armor plating. The next found flesh. It fell backward, crashing through a window into the street below. 4 rounds left. Her hands trembled as adrenaline surged, exhaustion clawing at her focus. She pressed her back to the wall and forced herself to breathe, counting heartbeats until the shaking eased. Fear whispered that she was alone, that the odds were impossible. She answered it with memory. Her squad laughing over bad coffee, her commander's steady voice reminding them why they held the line. She moved again. The remaining predators spread out, flanking with practiced coordination. Their arrogance had not vanished, but it was tempered by anger now. Mara retreated upward, drawing them into a skeletal tower where the wind howled through broken windows. She cut power conduits as she climbed, plunging sections into darkness, listening to confused snarls below. At the 20th floor, she stopped. The stairwell was narrow, the railing half collapsed. She waited until heavy footsteps shook the metal, then fired into the support beam. She had weakened earlier. The stairs gave way with a shriek of tearing steel. 2 bodies fell together, crashing into the depths. Only one remained. Mara slumped against the wall, chest heaving. She was bleeding, dizzy, and nearly spent, but she was still standing. Dawn's first gray light crept to the shattered skyline, outlining the ruined city in cold relief. Somewhere below, the last apex predator roared, a sound stripped of humor and thick with fury. She pushed herself upright and checked the pistol. Empty. She tightened her grip on the knife and began descending step by careful step. Whatever happened next would be decided face to face. The game was over, but the outcome was not. And as she moved toward the final confrontation, Mara understood that survival was no longer enough. She intended to make a statement the galaxy would remember. The fog thickened as she descended, carrying a metallic taste of rain and blood. Each step echoed with the memory of those she had lost, not as weakness, but as weight that anchored her resolve. The predator's presence pressed against her senses, a looming certainty rather than a mystery. Mara welcomed that. She had been hunted before by enemies, by doubt, by the quiet fear of failing others. This time, she would not retreat. The knife felt solid in her hand, an extension of will and training. When the final roar shook the stairwell, she did not flinch. She leaned forward, shoulders squared, and stepped into the open, ready to finish what they had begun. knowing that whatever followed, she would define it on her own terms, leaving the predators to learn too late why humanity endured when others fell. The city held its breath, waiting for the last. The fog thinned as Mara stepped into the open concourse, revealing the last apex predator standing amid twisted steel and fallen stone. It was larger than the others, its armor scarred and cracked, one arm hanging uselessly at its side. Its eyes fixed on her with something colder than rage, an assessing focus that acknowledged her as an equal threat at last. They circled each other slowly. Mara felt every injury now that the running had stopped, felt blood drying against her skin and weakness tugging at her knees. She tightened her grip on the knife, reminding herself that pain did not decide outcomes. Choices did. The predator advanced, careful, no longer rushing. It had learned, and that made it dangerous. It lunged without warning. Mara ducked beneath the swing of its blade and drove her shoulder into its chest, using momentum rather than strength. They crashed into a pillar, concrete splintering around them. The knife flashed, cutting deep across alien flesh, and hot blood sprayed across Mara's face. She ignored it, twisting free as the predator roared and struck again. The blow caught her ribs, lifted her off her feet and slamming her into the ground. Air burst from her lungs. For a heartbeat, darkness threatened to swallow everything. She rolled just as the predator's foot came down where her head had been, cracking stone. She forced herself upright, vision blurring, and slashed at its leg. The knife bit, and the creature staggered. They closed again, grappling, each strike slower now, heavier. Mara's arms burned, muscles screaming as she held the predator at bay. Its breath rasped, thick and wet, and she sensed its surprise that she still fought. Surprise hardened into frustration, then into something like fear. "You should have died," it snarled. "So should you," Mara answered, and drove a knife into the gap beneath its armor. The predator convulsed, claws spasming, then went still. Mara held the knife in place for a long second, ensuring the threat was finished, before letting go. She stepped back and sank to her knees, chest heaving. The city around her was silent, broken only by the wind and distant thunder. She did not celebrate. She thought of her squad, of the quiet moments between battles, of promises made and kept. Survival felt hollow without them, yet it mattered because of them. She pushed herself to her feet again, stubborn as ever, and activated the emergency beacon on her shattered armor. The signal pulsed weakly, but it pulsed. Minutes stretched. Mara leaned against the wall, every nerve raw, wondering if help would come or she had merely earned a slower end. The sky brightened, gray giving way to pale blue. Then the air trembled. A roar split the heavens, deeper and more familiar than anything she had heard that night. Dropships tore through the clouds, engines blazing, Terran markings sharp against the dawn. Weapons fire stitched the ruins, precise and overwhelming, though there was nothing left to kill. Mara sagged as armored figures rushed toward her, voices sharp with disbelief and relief. Hands steadied her, eased her down, wrapped her in warmth and light. She caught fragments of words, her name spoken again and again, anchoring her to consciousness. As they lifted her into the ship, she looked back once at the ruined city. 7 predators lay dead because they had mistaken cruelty for strength. Her eyes closed as exhaustion finally claimed her, but her grip tightened reflexively, as if still holding the knife. Later, in the quiet recovery, the story would spread, not as a tale of luck, but of resolve. A human left with almost nothing had refused to break. And somewhere beyond the stars, others would hear it and understand that humanity's endurance was not an accident. It was a choice made again and again, even when standing alone at the edge of defeat. Even when the cost was everything they had left. Mara woke to the muted hum of medical systems and the scent of antiseptic. White light pressed against her eyelids, gentle yet inescapable. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that she was alive. Pain returned next, blooming through her body like slow fire. She exhaled shakily and let the truth settle. Hands adjusted blankets, voices murmured nearby, and someone squeezed her fingers. Mara opened her eyes and focused on familiar insignia stitched onto armored shoulders. Human. The word carried more weight than any metal. Recovery blurred into days of rest and briefings. Command wanted every detail, every decision, every shot. Mara answered calmly, without embellishment. She spoke of terrain, timing, and mistakes, not courage. Others supplied that word for her. Across coalition space, analysts replayed sensor logs and combat recordings. 7 apex predators eliminated by 1 wounded Marine. The data unsettled long-held assumptions. The Carval Dominion noticed as well. Their expansion stalled. Strategies rewritten with unfamiliar caution. Fear had found a new shape. When Mara was released from the medbay, she requested no ceremony. She asked instead for names. 37 of them. She read each one slowly, committing them to memory. Survival felt empty, without remembrance. Weeks later, she stood before new recruits, her frame thinner but unbroken. They watched her with open awe. Mara did not dramatize the ruins or the killing. She spoke of fear, pain, and the decision to keep moving. She told them predators relied on certainty, and certainty could be broken. Humanity's strength, she said, was choosing to stand again after falling. The room listened in silence. Mara felt something loosen inside her that day. The burden did not vanish, but became lighter. Beyond the briefing halls, worlds watched humanity with new eyes. Some sought alliance, others hesitated. Stories traveled faster than fleets ever could. A single human, cornered and wounded, had refused extinction. The galaxy learned that day what endurance looked like. Mara never corrected the legends. She understood their purpose. Symbols mattered when reality was too large to grasp. On quiet nights, she still dreamed of rain and shattered stone. She woke with clenched fists and steady resolve. Tomorrow always came, and she would meet it standing. Humanity would do the same. The ruins became a case study, not a warning. Military academies dissected Mara's choices frame by frame. They taught adaptation, patience, and moral clarity under pressure. Recruits learned that victory did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered through exhaustion and restraint. Mara returned to active duty when she healed. She carried scars without shame. Each one was proof that she had endured. Her presence alone changed the tone of rooms. Commanders listened differently. Enemies hesitated. Humanity's reputation sharpened, not through dominance, but resolve. Mara understood the danger of that reputation. Predators would test it again. They always did. She prepared anyway, training harder, thinking deeper. Human survival was never guaranteed, only earned. That truth did not frighten her. It centered her. One evening, she stood alone on a viewing deck, stars stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, new threats were forming. She felt no urge to chase them. She would meet them when they came. That was enough. Behind her, human space hummed with quiet resilience. People lived, argued, loved, and hoped. They trusted the line to hold. Mara rested her palm against the glass, feeling that trust settle into her bones. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. The predators of the galaxy would learn, one by one, that some species could not be broken. Mara turned from the stars and walked back into the light, ready for the next reckoning.